We make history. Every day, 2.5 quintillion bytes. We draw from our instincts, creating moments that tell the world that this is who we are, who we've always been. We adapt to decide close calls, a breakthrough that takes a nanosecond to experience and a generation to manifest. This is our collective history. Together, it's ours to protect. For new histories to be written, new records shattered, new legacies forged. That's the power of we. CrowdStrike. We stop breaches.
Hi, I'm Shawn Henry, President of CrowdStrike Services and Chief Security Officer of CrowdStrike. I want to thank you for taking the time to attend and share your time with us. It's important we have these types of conversations that you'll hear today to keep these critical topics at the forefront of our mind. This is something I'm very passionate about, and I think it requires all of us to be attentive to, because the risk to our companies and our infrastructure is significant. Our adversaries are paying attention, and we must too if we're going to stay resilient into the future. If the pandemic has shown us anything about business, it's that our reliance on technology is stronger than ever, and safeguarding it is paramount to keeping operations running effectively and efficiently. 2020 was unexpected in the events it presented. In my more than 30 years in the security field, I thought I'd seen it all. Major organized crime syndicates, wide-scale, multi-billion euro fraud operations, and major terrorist attacks. The pandemic, though, is one of the most unusual and surreal experiences I've ever encountered. Watching how the adversaries adapted to it, however, was quite interesting, and one thing that was actually predictable. It was predictable because we know our adversaries will always exploit any opportunity they can to meet their objective, regardless of who or what it impacts. They will always keep coming at us. I want to highlight some things to be aware of as we close out this highly unusual year and address some of the ways you can safeguard your organization and prepare to begin 2021. Over the past 8 months, attack vectors have shifted and been repackaged, with adversaries leveraging the virus outbreak using COVID-themed lures and social engineering techniques. It's the same bad actors we've seen for many decades: organized crime groups, hacktivists, and nation states, and they've got the same general objectives they've always had: theft of intellectual property, financial gain, and disruption of our operations. But they've gone an extra layer deep by preying on human emotions during a moment in our history when we're most susceptible. They know people are eager for information, and when they receive an email or are alerted to something related to the pandemic, they'll often click on it. In addition to taking advantage of people's natural curiosity, they're also becoming more aggressive in other areas. We've seen adversaries repurposing ransomware to target hospitals that are overrun with COVID patients and target municipalities struggling to keep their communities safe. They're hacking research labs to try and get access to critically important intellectual property and research and development. And they're leaking medical records of world leaders to protest the COVID response, and they're threatening to sell more data of other executives and companies that they've gained access to extort them to make decisions. I only have a short time this morning, so I won't speak to this single point about the pandemic, but I could easily discuss the case studies for the entire session. The takeaway is that the adversary's return on investment is very high and their cost of operations is very low. They will constantly engage in this type of activity. They're going to adapt to what's going on in the world, and they're going to exploit it because they can reach their objectives at little cost. Unfortunately, this is the state of where we are globally. Everyone is facing the same circumstances, though every organization has different concerns based on their industry. Manufacturing companies, for example, must have people physically on site at their factories to create their products, and healthcare organizations need to see and treat patients. They've got to conduct surgeries and administer diagnostic tests. The financial services sector and the legal profession, on the other hand, can likely continue to operate very successfully and seamlessly in a remote environment. The bottom line is that COVID-19 has changed the way we all do business, and the adversaries know it. I speak publicly to organizations several times a month about various topics, including IT security, but I always include a component on the importance of the overall security landscape, the aggregation of digital, physical, and personal security. You need to have a comprehensive security program that addresses all three of these aspects equally. Otherwise, there will be gaps and you'll be deficient. Many companies also incorporate an intelligence capability into this mix as a common thread that can inform all components of the security team about the emerging threats and help to prioritize risks to the enterprise. Intelligence is nothing more than collecting actionable information to understand who's targeting you, why they're targeting you, how they're targeting you, what it is they're targeting, to give you the ability to peer around the corner and see what's coming before it hits you. It allows you to be proactive and predictive, detecting anomalous behavior, which allows you to quickly mitigate the threat and minimize the risk to your enterprise. And this rings especially true in today's environment. CrowdStrike actually conducted its annual Global Security Attitude Survey a few months back, and the results showed that accelerated digital and security transformation is a top business priority for our clients and partners at the moment. The subtitle of the findings even read, Insights into Security Transformation and Prevalent Attack Vectors in a Work from Anywhere World. That basically sums it up, doesn't it? So let's break this down into the three buckets of digital, physical, and personnel security. First, we'll talk about personnel security. After all, our employees are our most valuable asset. Unfortunately, the wrong person with access can cause immeasurable pain and suffering for a company. And that's the premise behind the insider threat. This year, especially during the pandemic, we've seen the need for a greater focus on thoroughly vetting for new hires, fully evaluating them prior to bringing them on board to ensure they're the proper fit, not just from a capabilities perspective, but from a character and cultural angle too. There are many examples of nation states that have either actively worked to get someone hired into a company they want to target, or co-opted someone who's already on the inside, taking existing employees and threatening them or extorting them in order to give access to these outsiders. In the United States, the FBI has made many arrests this year in the US, and there similarly have been others made in countries around the world, including Asia, Australia, and throughout Europe, by law enforcement intelligence services there. Organized crime is getting in on the act too. Tesla, just a couple of months ago, announced one of their employees was approached by a foreign national, presumably associated with an organized crime group, to introduce malware into the Tesla IT environment, likely so they could steal or impair data and extort the company for substantial funds. The employee contacted his management, who subsequently contacted the FBI. And after an investigation, the man was arrested and charged. People are still being hired during this tenuous time, but there might be less opportunity to vet them before they're given access to the organization's infrastructure. It's so important to conduct record checks and extensive interviews. There are now people working for organizations where they've never met anyone in the company in person before being hired to work remotely. Improper vetting greatly increases the likelihood of potentially hiring a bad actor. That actor may pose an insider threat. It goes without saying that all this needs to be done in a lawful way and in consideration of employees' privacy and civil rights. Once we have people physically onboarded into the company and granted access to the enterprise, it's important to ensure they're accessing what they're authorized to access. Beyond the important physical vetting I just described, there are technical ways we can do this. The concept of zero trust is the security philosophy that requires all users, even those inside the organization's enterprise network, to be authenticated, authorized, and continuously validate security configurations and their posture before being granted or keeping access to applications and data. This approach leverages advanced technologies such as multi-factor authentication, identity and access management, and next-generation endpoint security technology to verify the user's identity and maintain system security. Zero trust can only be successful if organizations are able to continuously monitor and validate that a user and his or her device has the right privileges and attributes. One-time validation simply won't suffice because threats and user attributes are all subject to change. It's important to remember that the overwhelming majority of our employees are valuable, productive parts of our organization, and we really can't live without them. Those that seek to do us harm are merely a microcosm of the employee population. Unfortunately, the risk that they pose because of the access they have and the difficulty in quickly identifying them requires vigilance on the part of all of our security teams. The next piece of the puzzle is digital security. The pandemic has rapidly and unexpectedly brought digital transformation and accelerated timelines to the forefront of security departments' priority lists. Many companies have had a multi-year plan to transfer their organization's infrastructure, move to the cloud, and create the ability to work from anywhere in a hybrid residential and office environment. What we've witnessed as a result of the pandemic, however, are companies that did in 3 weeks what they'd planned to do over 3 years. And when you rush to implement a strategy in 3 weeks rather than 3 years, there will be challenges, there will be missteps, and there will be new and evolving considerations for the organization to assess. Perhaps you haven't implemented all policies yet or developed ways to manage the equipment being added to your corporate system. We're experiencing a crisis where people are adapting to the situation created by the pandemic, where the most important objective for the company is having access to their data so their business can keep running. And when security issues are addressed, oftentimes after the fact, it undoubtedly leaves significant vulnerabilities. The remote workforce, by definition, necessitates employees move off the corporate security stack. Sensitive data may be accessed through unsafe Wi-Fi networks. Employees working from home may access sensitive business data through home networks that don't have the same security controls, such as firewalls used in traditional offices. More connectivity will be happening from remote locations, which will require greater focus on data privacy and hunting for intrusions from a greater number of entry points. It's not unusual for personal devices to have poor cybersecurity hygiene too. Employees working from home can result in an organization losing complete visibility over devices and the data that is stored on them, how they're configured, how they're patched, and how they're secured. The lack of visibility and control of corporate assets with limited protection creates substantial vulnerabilities to exploitation and significant liability for the company. Cloud-based technology with cloud-delivered security architecture ensures that you can protect every workload everywhere, including workloads outside of the firewall, even if they're offline, and it can provide real-time security functionality with the highest level of efficacy, along with compliance status information. Threat hunting across every device, especially those that are not on the network, is critical. Failure to hunt will result in a lack of detections, and it will end with more adversaries achieving and maintaining access to the environment. Realizing this capability with data accessible instantly and from anywhere can only be accomplished with native cloud-delivered technology. You can't protect what you can't see. Knowing who and what is on your network is foundational to proactive security management. It's critical to have complete visibility of every device connecting to the network, regardless of where it's connecting from. And finally, we have the facility piece. Some organizations are buying or managing real estate and planning for a return to a more traditional workforce model back on the corporate stack when a vaccine is readily available and things return somewhat to normal. Others, myself included, truly believe in the power of a hybrid model that includes a significant number of dispersed remote workers taking advantage of technology to work from anywhere. That, of course, will require strong IT system security, like the cloud-based technology I just discussed. There's a bigger picture beyond that, though. where the awareness, physical, and security technology piece come together to create the culture of the enterprise. It's incumbent upon every employee, regardless of their title, their position within the company, or the business unit they're assigned to have a security mindset. This is not the sole responsibility of the CISO's office or the IT security team, but rather a whole of company obligation. When I began working at CrowdStrike and took on the role of Chief Security Officer, I went through the risk calculus for all facets of our security posture. Who are the threat actors? What vulnerabilities could they exploit? And what could that mean for our company in terms of impact to our operations and our reputation? And I considered that risk across all facets of security: personnel, digital, and physical security. What does our facility access procedure look like? How do we handle visitors to the space? Do our employees have a security first mindset? And have we successfully created a culture that empowers them to ask the hard questions when something seems suspicious? Security must be considered a priority in evaluations as you grow your organization, hire new people in an expanded geographic footprint, introduce new equipment and capabilities, and increase your target space through acquisitions and build new facilities. If you think about security first, it'll help you identify risks in any space and prepare for a way to mitigate them before they impact the organization. And if, as a leader, you promote and demonstrate good security practices, your team will follow suit. The leader sets the pace for the rest of the pack, and your personal commitment to security is the first step in building that culture. I'd like to switch tracks for a moment and talk about other critical events of 2020 and some more key considerations as we enter 2021. As you know, all eyes were on the US election a few weeks ago for a number of reasons. In October, at our US Falcon event, I had the pleasure of hosting a panel about election security with both a senior US government executive and with Sir Robert Wainwright, the former executive director of Europol. We addressed several critical areas surrounding election protection to include malign foreign influence, intelligence collaboration, illicit campaign funding operations, disinformation efforts, and social media propaganda. What I found incredibly interesting for this group is that there are approximately 50 regional, national, and European elections transpiring over the next year. Knowing this, the European Union passed a resolution in October of 2019 aimed at covering and protecting these elections. As a result of their research, the findings identified a significant increase in disinformation cases across the EU, more than doubling from the previous year. Sir Robert stressed that it's a tricky balance to enhance security while not hindering the privacy of the voting population. He's quoted as saying, "This is about as important as it gets for any democracy." I think Sir Robert's comments reinforce that the responsibility does not fall solely to the public sector, not solely to the government. Similar to a cyber attack and the subsequent incident response in the corporate world, which requires a whole of company effort to right the ship, when it comes to global democracy and election security, there must be a whole of community effort to protect what has been fought so hard to secure. We have an existing synergy of international government allies, but we need to foster stronger synergy with our international private sector partnerships. We are one cybersecurity community. We are all connected. We know the adversaries and their motivations, and we need to be aware. We need to be proactive, and we need to coordinate in defending them and protecting our very way of life. With the uncertainty of the pandemic, the future of remote versus traditional office workers, the ever-changing and disparate infrastructures, shifting geopolitical issues, and evolving adversary tactics and techniques, we have to recognize that security is no longer survival of the fittest, but rather survival of the most adaptable. The journey we're on is a perilous one. The stakes are high, and we must stand on the line to protect data and infrastructure from those who seek to do it harm. I'm proud to stand beside you, united in common cause against our adversaries. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event we have planned, and I trust you'll find it valuable. I sincerely thank you for spending time with us today, and I look forward to future collaboration. one team, one fight.